I had already kind of been watching MST because, like, what nerdy kid did not watch that?
Right.
It's pretty great. And I mean, that goes for Joel Robinson, that goes for Mike Nelson.
Yeah, the whole gang. Yeah.
I will say I was not a big fan of the newest permutation of it.
I'd love to talk about that too at some point, because that's
really?
like, it's interesting because it is so different, right? In terms of they changed the tempo of it. And that change of tempo actually kind of, in my mind, at least from what I'm used to, kind of hurts my appreciation of the jokes. And like,
yeah, like if they were gonna do something like that, and I'm not gonna bash on anybody because it's not my place, but
we can think of it as a critique.
Yeah, if they were gonna do something like that, I wish they would have just made like a oh, there goes Joe. Okay. All right, we're by ourselves. We're now two hosts. All right. So
these two Mats.
These2mats.com. So
I heard that. I'm back.
I heard that. What are you kids doing in there? So where was I going?
I ruined your train of thought. I'm sorry.
So I wish they would have made a show that was like an homage to MST if they were going to do something like that.
Yeah.
Where it was like its own new thing. Like don't prance out the same puppets, but they have completely different voices for like the third time in their history.
Yeah, I got what you're saying.
Third or fourth time, because I mean I remember back to this season 0 of MST episodes when they were on cable access.
Yeah, they did have different voices for the robots, didn't they?
Because one of them was one of the Mads was different. One of the villains was different. It was like there was either 3 of them or it was like a different guy.
I've seen like one of those episodes, and it was kind of weird because it was like they were still figuring out the format and the formula and whatever. I mean, it evolved, right? And
yeah.
It's kind of like the new MST3K sort of. It feels like a lot of reboots and remakes where it's like we want to try and do the it's all this nostalgia stuff, you know, but not necessarily evolving on the format entirely. Like they evolved in some ways. I really liked the addition of like the ska band, you know, like I like that. And I kind of liked what they did a little bit with was it Pearl's clone, like that whole thing. Like that's kind of fun.
The Felicia Day's character?
Yeah. Like that's kind of fun. But like
well, and I mean it had a lot of things that could have been good. Like the Mads were like Felicia Day and Patton Oswalt.
Yeah.
I mean, they're great.
It's great picks.
You know, great picks. The intro was rad as fuck with like the like rock band, you know, like you're kind of saying, you know.
Sure.
And like the whole evil henchman thing was cool. There were cool things about it. Yeah. It's just, you know what turned me off? There was one moment that turned me off and I've never gone back to it. It's the first, which is a good practice. Just as soon as something makes you uncomfortable, never go back to it, kids. So the one thing that turned me off about it was they made Servo fly up in the theater and over to the top of the screen.
Yes.
And I'm like, wait a second. No, because he always, whenever they carried him, if you know your MST lore, if you know the lore, the reason that Mike or Joel carries him in and puts him in the chair in real life is because he's a puppet, right? And he has to put him on Kevin Murphy's hand. But in the show, they said that he had to be carried over a vent in the floor because his hover skirt would not allow him to go over it.
Oh.
And then if you go ahead and say, hey, we got a guy from Nerdist and he's in a yellow suit and Netflix is doing it, and look at the big shiny, we're going to take the thing that all the nerds liked and we're going to give it to all the popular people. And you just completely erase that part of it. That right there shows me you're being disingenuous to the original spirit of the thing.
Right. No, I got you.
And I feel like that's going on with a lot of things now, like the reboots and the remakes. And,
I was literally just about to point that out, and I don't even think it's just reboots and remakes. I think that some of the stuff that they did. So obviously, I know you're going to be up on this, but The Walking Dead, when the show first came out, I was like all in. I was 100% in on that show. And somewhere early in season 2, they had fired Frank Darabont, who was really the driving force in getting it going, and shit started falling apart for me. Like, I remember specifically, and this is to your point about one thing is like the straw that breaks the camel's back. There was an episode where I think Shane and like this big like fat hunter guy or whatever were like up against a brick wall, and there was like a cage of zombies in front of them reaching through, and it's like literally back against the wall. They're caged in. How are they going to get out of it? Cliffhanger or whatever. And then it goes to credits, and it's like, oh, I gotta watch the next episode. And it comes on to the next episode, and Shane and the hunter are running down a hallway, and I was like, what the fuck? How did they get out of that situation? And it's just like, oh, and like, I talk to people about that now when they're trying to tell me, oh, you need to watch Walking Dead, it gets really good. I'm like, no, fuck that show. Because if you're going to take those kinds of shortcuts and, you know, just kind of fuck, like, the storytelling, like, I don't want to be involved. I'm not giving you my attention, my money, my time, whatever. And
sure,
I feel like that's happening with a lot of properties when they do it, like, even with Star Wars. Like me and Rainwater were talking about Last Jedi and this and that. There's so many liberties taken these days where it feels like they're thumbing their nose at the core fan base in order to expand, which I get it. That's the business model, and that makes sense. You got to make the profit back for a $500 million movie. But at the same time, like, I don't feel like a lot of them are looking at the long-term implications of it. They're looking for the quick cash grab to make back the money as opposed to cementing something that they can build on in the future, because most of these executives and most of the storytelling are like, I need to get my money now, because when I get out of here, I'm not making royalties off of this shit, and the studio, fuck the studio, you know what I mean? So I'm curious to know your take on some of maybe the biggest violations, because you're a connoisseur of all things comic book. And at least to me,
I
so,
sound like such a douchebag.
You're not a douchebag. You're like the most knowledgeable, like, sequential comics person that I know, and it cross pollinates between film and comic books. So I'm curious to know, from your opinion, what is like some of the biggest violations that some franchises have made in the past decade of comic adaptations? What would you say are some of the biggest missed opportunities to do it right?
I'm going to take that in a little different direction. So, that ding was perfect with your thumbs up. Awesome. Viewers, we have sound effects now.
Yeah.
So, in terms of changing formats and the annoyance of reboots and remakes not potentially respecting source material as much, I feel like a lot of nerds get in the weeds about that, and I say nerds with the highest respect. I consider myself a nerd. Nerds are great, and I love all of you for being that way, but I think people get lost in the weeds a lot on that, and they focus too much on the differences. They focus on, and it kind of, I'm going to get woo about this too. Like, it kind of goes to like what's going on in the country right now.
Yeah.
We're too divided. All of us are too divided in this country. Like, we have to draw hard lines against other people with like, this is the right way because it's my way, and that's your way and it's not the right way. And I think that's kind of a toxic way to think about stuff.
Okay.
Sometimes.
Definitely doesn't help, that's for sure.
And even with something like trivial, like fiction, right? Like media that's supposed to just entertain us. I love the original Star Wars and the expanded universe and all the novels and the comics. And all of those were pretty much cast aside by and large when they came about with episodes 7, 8, and 9. And I mean, that was a decision they made because that was the decision they made. I mean, it's the end of it.
Right.
It made me sad, but it also, I like Star Wars, so I was willing to give 7, 8, and 9 a shot and see what they're doing with the new stuff. And by and large, I'll say I liked it. I enjoy what they are doing now with the stuff.
You're talking about like The Mandalorian?
I love The Mandalorian. I think Mandalorian is, even saying that I just said I like 7, 8, and 9, which I do. But I do think The Mandalorian more accurately captures that original excitement that all of us had seeing Star Wars and Return of the Jedi and Empire, which I know I said those out of order, nerds. 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. You know, and because I mean, it kind of ramped up with the prequels, right? We all had the Pepsi cans and the, you know, the little midi-chlorian chips that came with the action figure.
Yep.
You know, there's always a lot of hype around things, and like it can be good and bad, but I think what we're losing by completely casting aside the new stuff is what new audience members that we would have a chance to bond with and enjoy something with are picking up out of that being their first experience. Like, I think, especially, like, I know, I mean, I may be speaking out of turn here, but from what I gather on social media, a lot of LGBTQ plus A, you know, and I'm trying to say it correctly, I'm not trying to lampoon it, that community are finding a lot of great role models in a lot of the newer stuff, because it's being written with that in mind. And it's not just something that you have to try to find in the crevices or in the background of what was made prior, which there is that stuff too, and it's great if you can find it. But I feel like they need someone to identify with too, and for, you know, kind of the classic nerds who were there from kind of the beginning. I wasn't there from right at the beginning. I was born the year after Jedi. But I think to cut that off is to cut off all those people and kind of passively invalidate their experience.